apples cut in half. Every ladder ends somewhere. Better climb its steps with care. I'll be the one who waits too long, turns around and finds it gone. Choose the life you want to live. Give the love you want to give. Take the moment when it comes. Let it lead you, let it run. Feel the moisture in the air. Feel her fingers through your hair. Don't be shy when asking to be that way you always were meant to. You say that life is gone. By rain to our common unknown aim, from the north side of the town to the south where we lay down under floodlights but no stars, without people, without cars, where I ask you without sound, where you answer without words. Do the move that's written down. When you close your eyes you find you can prophesize the steps, you can visualize the maps, if you act upon it when there's no trace of doubt within. When your heart is freshly stung, you cannot fail, you cannot act wrong. You say that life is gone. pristine, under the stars, young evergreen, long summer nights, living the dream, keeping it fresh, avoiding routine. Sometimes you just wanna feel good, you know I like to feel good, oh, won't we? It's high time you feel, don't you wanna feel good? It's so good to we could really when you hit it.
We spent a long time coming, and we were too sure. And now I see you fall to the floor. We spent a long time running while we were slumming it for. And now they're knocking down my door. Don't blink, open your eyes. We move it to the left, we move it to the right. Can you see through my disguise? We move it to the left and we move it to the right. Don't blink, open your eyes now. Oops, and you might be missing me. Yeah, you might be missing ways I followed. We spent a long time coming, and we were too sure. And now I see you fall to the floor. We spent a long time running while we were slumming it for. And now they're knocking down my door. Well, please go away, I'm trying to chill. Why'd you foot me with your bills? It's really not the time and place. I've been losing a little faith. Faith in me, faith in them, faith in who, where, why. And you better keep me moving to the left-hand side, where the love's strong. I've been leaning just a little to the right. We keep it moving on. You better keep me loving on the left-hand side, where the love's strong. I've been moving just a little to the right. We keep it moving on. We keep it moving on. I keep it moving on, yeah. We keep it moving on. We keep it moving on. Yeah, I'm in my mind. I've been working on lazy days. No, no. I've been waiting for you. Kick it back, just feeling good. Yeah, yeah. A nobody covered sensation. I feel my heart is racing. I got the pizza. I got a pizza, baby, and I'm on my way up to you. I got the pizza, you know me. I got a pizza, baby, and you know I'm coming for you. I'm in my mind, I've been searching for better days. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've been craving for you on a Friday. Let's go to space. A nobody covered sensation. I feel my heart is racing. I got the pizza. I got a pizza, baby, and I'm on my way up to you. I got the pizza, you know me. I got a pizza, baby, and you know I'm coming for you. I got the pizza. I got a pizza, baby, and I'm on my way up to you. I got the pizza, you know me. I got a pizza, baby.
Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the CEER Annual Conference 2026. We are absolutely delighted to have you with us online today, so very warm welcome. Our theme for this annual conference today is United in Regulation, National Authorities, European Impact. Basically, CEER launched its 2026-2029 strategy at the beginning of the year, and we want this conference to build on this important document. Our focus today is really on action and on translating the high-level policy objectives that we're discussing here in Brussels into concrete regulatory discussions and drive the European energy transition in general. We have a fantastic lineup ahead, featuring dynamic panel discussion on balancing market convergence with national realities, which is very important for regulators, but also discussing the practical friction of financing cross-border infrastructure and discussing the grids package, which is so topical at the moment. We'll also end up with a poolside chat tackling energy affordability, which is also a very important topic. So to officially kick off and share her opening remarks, it's my absolute pleasure to invite on stage the president of CEER, Annegret Grubel. Annegret, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raphael, and good afternoon, everyone. And I also send you a warm welcome to all the online participants and, of course, also those speakers that are here. Very, very happy to see you. And indeed, this annual conference, we want to, let's say, fill with a little bit of flesh our CEER strategy pillars, the optimization of grid modernization by market-oriented solutions. This is something which we which is very important for us. And of course, in the center of all our activities as regulators, it's always empowering and protecting consumers. And last but not least, it is deepening the integration of a fully decarbonized energy system. So we want to support, to drive indeed the European energy transition with a regulation that takes into account all these different aspects. So these are the core areas, and we have prepared 2 panels looking at market integration and how to balance European convergence with national reality, something which seems a difficult task, in particular in these challenging times that we currently see with geopolitical tensions, etc., with a lot of pressure on governments and also sometimes, of course, then also pass through to regulators. So this is something which we want to look at, and how we can manage these challenging times in a way that ultimately benefits all consumers, all users, where we get enough and cost-efficient investment, efficient use of the grid, of course, and as I said, a decarbonized energy system. Yeah, so this is the triangle, if you like, that we want to look at. And we have, besides the 2 panels at the end, a short poolside chat, which looks at one of the challenges that we currently discuss a lot, the affordability. I think it's something which we will look at in more detail later, but already now, you know, the energy transition maybe takes longer, is probably more effective than more costly than we thought, and we need to make sure that the transition is fair and remains affordable for all users. So something which we have to balance, which we have to finally come to terms with, and what can we do as regulators to ensure that this happens in a fair and cost-efficient way. And last but not least, we are in Europe, so we need also to look at all the cross-border cost allocation questions and how to ensure the financing of the grids also across borders, across member states. And for this, I'm very, very glad to now be able to hand over to the representation of the incoming Irish presidency, Lisa Underwood, who is the energy attaché at the permanent representation of Ireland to the EU. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Angrish. So good afternoon. I'm delighted to be here today at CEER's annual conference. I'd like to start by saying that my remarks today will reflect the fact that tomorrow Ireland is taking up the presidency of the Council of the European Union. This is for the 8th time. So this means that I will focus on our priorities for our presidency, but they very much align with the theme today of affordable energy and financing grid infrastructure. So in developing our priorities, the Irish government has consulted extensively with partners and stakeholders to shape the presidency. Reflecting this, the Irish presidency will focus on 3 interlinked pillars: competitiveness, values, and security. These will guide all aspects of our work as presidency. On competitiveness, we will focus on fostering the prosperity and well-being of the Union and its citizens. Priorities here include taking forward the One Europe, One Market roadmap. On values, we will strive to uphold the indispensable foundation of our union, and on security, we will place the protection of our citizens, our economy, our society, and our environment at the centre of all our work. We have worked closely with our trio partners, Lithuania and Greece, to develop a trio presidency programme which will ensure a coherent approach to the work of the Council through the 18-month trio period, starting tomorrow on the 1st of July till the end of 2027. So, on energy, the Irish presidency will prioritise work to deliver sustainable, affordable and secure energy systems across the European Union. To deliver decarbonised and affordable power for all European citizens, we will emphasise the need to expedite the deployment of renewables, grid, flexibility, and secure our energy supply with indigenous renewables and clean energy. As we all know, energy loves a crisis, so I'd like to assure you that we will remain flexible and adaptable in light of the evolving geopolitical situation, including its potential impact on the progression and negotiation of key legislative files during our presidency. Energy markets and prices are directly impacted by events far beyond our borders. The ongoing conflict in the Middle East underlines why Europe must accelerate the deployment of renewables across all sectors, continue to invest in our grid, and insulate ourselves from future price shocks. So, turning to the files that we know will feature during our presidency, the European Grid Package will be key to our aims to deliver a sustainable and affordable energy system. This will be closely followed by the forthcoming network charges proposal. On grids, deploying grid networks and interconnection more quickly and at scale will underpin the EU's competitiveness agenda, ensure our collective energy security, and help drive down consumer cost. The unsteady geopolitical situation reaffirms that the only lasting route out of fossil fuel dependency is to modernise our energy system by accelerating the shift to renewable electricity and by electrifying our economy as rapidly as possible. The importance of this file to ensuring a fit-for-purpose, modernised grid that is central to the EU's competitiveness agenda was recognised by our European leaders. In March of this year, they called on the co-legislators to agree an ambitious grid package to quickly build the necessary infrastructure, ensure its protection and resilience, and enhance interconnections at national and trans-European level, thus contributing to an integrated and more robust energy market. I think it is okay for me to say that as an isolated island energy system, Ireland understands the importance of electricity interconnection to security, reliability, cost-effectiveness, and environmental sustainability. So in line with the ambitions expressed in the One Europe, One Market roadmap, we will aim to reach political agreement on this file with the European Parliament during our presidency. We know that this is an ambitious aim, particularly for, both files for TENI and the Permitting Directive, but we will build on the strong foundations laid by the Cyprus presidency, who secured the Council's negotiating mandate at the Energy Council last Friday. They showed excellent leadership on this file. They listened carefully to the concerns raised by member states on this crucial piece of legislation, and they delivered a very finely balanced compromise which secured strong support for our entering trilogues with the Parliament. So I might speak a little bit to some of the compromises in the Council position, because from looking at the CEER position on the European Grids Package, I think there are definitely some parts of alignment that you might be interested in. So as the Cyprus Minister explained on Friday, the Council mandate preserves a more European approach by entrusting the Commission with the preparation of a cross-sectoral central scenario, while also ensuring an appropriate role for Member States and their regulatory authorities. It provides for additional sensitivities or updates to the central scenario at least every 24 months in order to take account of rapid developments in the energy markets. It maintains the enhanced role for NRAs and ACER. It maintains but clarifies the provision relating to congestion income. Clarifications include that congestion income does not apply to domestic congestion income arising from internal bidding zones or income generated before the entry into force of the regulation. It also clarifies that congestion income would remain within the accounts of TSOs who would be able to allocate it to relevant projects of common interest or projects of mutual interest or other projects reducing interconnector congestion in their own member state. This would apply until the needs identification report demonstrates that no additional cross-border capacity is required to reduce interconnector congestion. It introduces a new security and resilience category of projects with safeguards to ensure that there is sufficient financing for all the objectives of the regulation. And finally, it makes tacit approve it voluntary and removes it for grid connection decisions. So Ireland is now tasked with defending this mandate in interinstitutional negotiations. And while we don't expect that to be an easy job, we will represent the position of the Council and the voices of all member states and those whose voices they represent, and act as an honest broker in trilogue negotiations. On our remaining files, we will also aim to deliver a general approach on the up-and-coming network charges proposal, a proposal that is no doubt will be of particular interest to you here today. However, unfortunately, as it has not been published, I do not have any details that I can share with you. I would point you to the Action Plan for Affordable Energy from 2025, which committed to guidance in this area and, if necessary, legislation. That guidance was published last summer and is a good place to start while we await for the publication of this file, which is expected to be in mid-July. I would say that similar to the European Grids Package, I expect that this file will be progressed quickly through the Council, so I would advise you to be ready to submit your views on the file to your ministries for the first meetings back in September. So some light summer reading for your holidays. We will also make meaningful progress on the energy security framework, and we expect that this will include some measures around oil stocks. But the work does not stop there, as we will also have the Connecting Europe Facility Regulation, the Euratom Research and Training Programme, the Omnibus to Simplify Energy Project legislation, and possibly the Repower EU files yet to be introduced by the Commission. So a light presidency for us. Finally, I will wrap up by saying that I very much look forward to listening to the discussions from the 3 very topical and highly relevant panel sessions on market integration, financing the grid and affordability, and of course the keynote speech from Mr. Eamon Ryan, my former Energy Minister. So with that, I will say thank you for listening and hand over.
Thank you, Lisa, for this keynote speech. So now it's my absolute pleasure to invite the first panel to sit down for the first discussion on market integration. Yes, please go ahead. And I'm welcoming our moderator, Johan Rupp, but also the 3 speakers that they will introduce themselves while they're getting set up. We have a question for you online, or survey or a poll that you can answer to, and that is directly related to this panel. And it's, I would say, a fairly broad question, which is, okay, what do you see as a primary risk when implementing the electricity market design, right? And we have 4 answers for you. You might also want to say it's both a bit of the 4, but yeah, we have these questions online. We'll leave time for the audience online to reply to it, and we will address them during the panel. And with that, I will give the floor to Johan and for the first panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raphael. So my name is Johan Rupp. I'm from the Swedish regulator. I'm also chair of the electricity working group under CEER. And today I have the pleasure and the fortunate to have Mathilde Lalonde here, team leader at the electricity market, DG Energy, European Commission. And next to her, we have Alda Osola. She is CEER Vice President and also from the Latvian regulator. And to my far left, we have Max Schneider, advisor, wholesale markets, Euroelectric. So I'm very happy to have you here. And I guess thanks to Lisa pointing out Ireland being an island and interconnections are one source of security of supply. I think this topic will be very well in line with this. So my first question to each one of you is which benefits of enhanced market integration would you like to bring forward? And in addition, how can policymakers, regulators and market participants best achieve them? So I give the floor to you, Mathilde, first.
Thank you, Johan. Good morning, everyone. I think it's a very topical topic, so market integration. Especially now, it was said in the introduction, we are in challenging times with a very strong focus on the level of prices and affordability. And we need to reflect on what market integration has brought to European member states and can still bring. Market integration improves security of supply. I think it's worth noting that we've been through a very important crisis in 2021, 2022, without any security of supply issue, and with lots of quite high level of electricity trading between member states and electricity flows. So that's worth to be noted. Market integration also helps softening price spikes that have the tendency to go very high or to go very low, depending on the level of integration of the different regions. CEER has some years ago evaluated the potential of market integration, the benefit to 34 billion per year. It's an important number because when we speak about affordability, it's not only about the level of the wholesale electricity price, but the cost of the energy system as a whole. Also, it brings down the security of supply costs. We saw also in a report from CEER that in 2024 we had more than 40 domestic measures for security of supply for a cost of 11 billion euros. So here we see that there are still potential to tap with further market integration. The main obstacle I would like to point out now is the question of congestion and how we deal with them. As you know, the measure that we take to deal with congestion, so the redispatching, first, they highly rely on gas, on fossil power plants, and also they are very costly. Only in 2024, they cost about 4 billion and represented 60 terawatt hours, which is the equivalent of the consumption of yearly consumption of Austria. So it's really massive numbers who can increase a lot. The Joint Research Center has evaluated in a recent study that the cost of such measures could increase up to 100 billion by 2040 yearly. So it's really massive, and we need to see how we can tackle this, how we can tackle these bottlenecks in the grid. Yes, by building more grids, that's the purpose of the grids package, and building more in a smarter way, but also by using the infrastructure that we have to their best potential, avoiding that renewables are curtailed. So I would like to conclude maybe on what can be done. First, we need to reflect a bit on the long-term issues. We've been very much in a crisis mode since the last year, with very important measures taken and which were very much needed. However, now we need to also see what are the issues that we're facing in this electricity market design, what are the main elements that prevents further integration and further benefits to be tapped, which can really have the potential to lower system costs. We need to work on implementation. That may sound a bit generic as a statement for the European Commission, but we do think it's extremely important that we have rules that are developed at high speed. A new proposal, as it was also said in the introduction, coming in July on network charges, but we need to implement what we have in the regulatory framework. And last point, use our infrastructure to the maximum potential in order to further integrate this market. Thank you.
Thank you, Mathilde. And Alda, I guess you have practical experience of building grids to new synchronous areas.
Oh, absolutely right. Coming from Latvia and representing at the same time three Baltic countries, being on the edge of European Union, and until the beginning of last year connected to the Russian-Belarusian grid for the balancing of the transmission system. Of course, we also as regulators have witnessed not only the successful market integration and the benefits of that, but of course also we saw how when you have trust between different bodies, so between regulators, between transmission system operators, between market participants, through clear, transparent rules and design, that we can all work together, and that we can achieve huge benefits in that sense. Yeah, indeed, synchronization was a huge project. It lasted nearly 2 decades, in fact, and it's not only about physical infrastructure, it's also about how we as regulators could cooperate. And of course, there are national differences, as the panel says, but probably this project and synchronization as such was successful because national and regional differences were taken seriously. Of course, we all come from different realities, and we cannot ignore physical reality and also the physical grid constraints, but these issues should be addressed. That's also what we did, along with physical infrastructure upgrade. We, as regulators, worked on common methodologies, common rules. There were also things that we could not completely synchronize in terms of rules. There were differences when it comes to how resources are put in the balancing market. Still, we have common balancing market in the Baltics. There are differences, but they are justified as long as the market is not fragmented. So regulators have also and are obliged, of course, to address those. But I think one of the key tasks is to ensure that there is no market fragmentation. So all in all, Baltics has seen huge benefits from the market integration. Our markets are certainly, well, Matilda mentioned resilience and security of supply. We were able to pool resources together, and that has also delivered lower costs of electricity to consumers. So we see huge benefits, and I think they can. This is a good example, and probably also can be used to scale up.
Thank you very much, Alda. So Max, you represent Eurelectric, and you have different kinds of members. So I'm very keen to hear your answer to this market integration question.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Johan, and thank you very much on behalf of Eurelectric already for the invitation to this conference. I won't invent something new here. Also, for us, the basic premise of market integration remains very much true. If supply and demand are matched over a larger area, we can allocate resources at lower cost and lower emissions. And the integrated market is in and of itself already also a source of investor certainty, is something that is very much needed for the energy transition. And we do think that market integration has come a long way since the beginning of liberalization. And now the task is more addressing residual market fragmentation if the benefits that were identified outweigh the transition costs, which can be substantial. And I'll take a few examples. Also, as Mathilde mentioned, congestions, remedial actions. Here we see that the remedial actions are still organized at a national level, and that this leads to curtailment of renewables and upregulation of more expensive and emitting assets. And we do think that it would be in the European benefit to have more coordination at regional level of those remedial actions. It's also probably a good thing for reliability to have more inter-TSO coordination. Of course, this is not an easy topic. There have been court cases, a lot of discussions, and now I think implementation of ROSC is scheduled not before 2028. But yeah, we would welcome some progress on that side. Maybe another thing I could mention is fallbacks. There was a partial decoupling last June 2024 that hurt the confidence in the market a bit, and we have thought, market participants have thought that progress on this end has been a bit too slow, even if the introduction of volume allocation in bidding zones with multiple NEMOs is already a good progress. And I will just finish with a few suggestions to improve stakeholder cooperation. Of course, there's no magic wand to overcome divergences of interests, but already we would welcome even better stakeholder cooperation. For market participants, that's important because if they don't have enough visibility of projects, they can't prepare as well. So for us, timelines, deadlines for implementation, they need to adequately represent the implementation costs that market participants face. And then in terms of cooperation also, regional groups such as the core consultative group, we think that's quite a good practice that can be maybe replicated. And just one more point on the governance. There's been some discussion on that end with an ACER recommendation. We acknowledge that pan-European pan-European entities or regional entities, there might be a benefit to pooling the oversight of those entities at European level. And when it comes to regional entities or regional projects, which bring a lot of value, but sometimes there's a lack of accountability, we need some better alignment of NRA enforcement to avoid that there's a zero-sum game where nobody looks after the correct implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. At last note, on enforcement, I can enlighten you if you haven't noticed, but we regulators have really taken that on board, and we are on the progress. Of course, we come from a period where we were just happy that things were implemented or about to be implemented, and now we realize they have to be completed also. Then I go back to you, Mathilde. From your point of view, how can we best ensure the national implementation strategies don't inadvertently create new barriers to cross-border trading and market integration? I think Max alluded to that as well.
Yeah, indeed. Once we've said that, we need a European integrated market, this doesn't mean that national or regional specificities should be set aside. Not at all. And today there is already quite a framework for this regional cooperation. Beyond the fact that legislative texts take into account national specificities when it's needed, we have a framework in place, in particular in the tertiary legislation, so in network codes and guidelines, with regional term, condition, and methodologies that can be developed, and some also in certain cases national when it matters more for decentralized resources, for example, or very local issues. So that the case is in most of the network codes, and this enable really a cooperation. But I will be glad to also have your views from the NRA perspective. But enables more cooperation and to take really into account specificities at a more local scale. That being said, I would like to underline the key role of the national regulatory authorities. I like what you say in the title of the conference, so National Authorities, European Impact. I think that makes a lot of sense. Indeed, it's very important that NRAs also focus on European impact and cross-border aspects. One example could be the rule for maximizing cross-border capacities to 70% and the possibility to have derogation for security issue. it's also in the responsibilities of NRAs to look to the neighbors to ensure that that this derogation remains in the framework that is given, and to have a say if they think it's important. I would also take the example given from Max on the regional regional operation coordination, ROSC, and the cost sharing. These are very important deliverables that are really, they are very technical, they are very specific, but they are really the foundation of our market design. If we don't manage to have this regional cooperation, which must come with also cost sharing, it will be very difficult to move forward with our current market design. So that's also something that is important, where the regional scale is key. And last point, important to keep looking forward. So even if there are lots of national specificities and aspects to take into account, and the balance is delicate, it's important to look forward to this integrated European market, to what needs to be done. So I'm thinking also of the market coupling, for example, the algorithm which on certain aspects reaches its limits. We need to prepare the future, prepare the ground for the next decade.
Thank you, Mathilde. Yeah, I think maybe listening to Max and now Mathilde again, I think the key word here is to look at the potential perhaps rather than obstacles. But Alda, following your successful synchronization with continental Europe, what are the key lessons from the Baltic case regarding regional regulatory cooperation?
Indeed, a number of lessons I could point out to, and I already mentioned that I truly believe that those can be scaled up. I would think of perhaps three lessons at least. So one is to have this clear common goal. That is exactly what Mathilde now also mentioned, that we have to move all in one direction. And you mentioned about maybe sometimes slow implementation, but it's better to move slowly but steadily and have this goal in mind. And in the synchronization project, or a case, of course, all Baltics had that in mind, despite there were many obstacles, of course, in this process, and both physical and financial, and also some political disagreements were disturbing factors, but the common goal was there, and we all, regulators, TSOs, market participants, found a way how to overcome them. So that first would be have this goal in mind, and know the direction where we move. It's similar with at the European level as well. The second would be that this cooperation should be quite practical. It's not sufficient to meet in different forums and discuss issues. There should be also some practical steps taken. Physical infrastructure had to be built, financing had to be also coordinated and endorsed by regulators as well. Luckily, public funding through EU funds was very helpful from the European Commission programs, so that was also helpful. And of course, joint methodologies and different other rules that we as regulators had to come together and agree on very practical things. And probably the third is related to consumers. The best is, although it's all we believe is beneficial, bringing benefits to consumers through greater resilience and lower prices of electricity and the network costs, but consumers should not have notice probably on all these technical aspects. And before synchronization, before the date, it actually happened when this, plug was pulled on February 9th, 2025. There were also lots of misinformation circulating around what will happen and how it will go and so on, but everything was normal like any other day, so no glitches, nothing like that. So the best is if we all work well and coordinate well behind the scenes, and the consumers do not notice. Probably the last overarching is trust as well. That is required, that we all know what we work for, and despite the differences that we have, it is an important ingredient in the whole process. And I would think that it's also important when we look at the European level and market integration.
Thank you very much, Alda. I think the word trust is also a key word in this discussion. I guess Lisa, who spoke before here, she will know that very well in the council between the member states, and being as a group, see the best for the group and not per individual member state. So Max, I guess you market participants, you're looking for long-term investments and you need clear rules so you can predict and so forth. So how can regulators best support industry in delivering the objectives of the integrated market?
I think to answer this question, it would be beneficial to distinguish the long-term and the short-term markets, because we think that short-term markets are primarily serving efficient dispatch of assets, well, under self-dispatch under the current target model, and also incentivizing system-serving behavior, flexibility, like incentivizing then in some way investments into flexibility, demand response. But therefore, it's important that the integrity of those short-term markets is preserved. I think that's our most frequently repeated line as CEER Electric, and to avoid, if possible, decisions that change the conditions under which investments were made to ensure their profitability. And so what we see key for the short-term markets at the moment, and I'm coming back to also some things that were already said, is having a reliable market infrastructure. That's the basics, and then also having a level playing field. That's essential if market participants are competing across borders. Here I can mention, for example, in the balancing markets, there's these cycles of harmonization of rules for balancing service providers, and we see room to harmonize that more to ensure that there's a level playing field. And when, however, those short-term markets might not be sufficient to have all the investments we need to have resource adequacy, and therefore we do welcome all the improvements in the recent market design reform. So the support for long-term contracts which provide more price predictability to both the provider and the off-taker, and also under the CSAF now, the target model for capacity mechanisms. There's been also Commission recommendations on those topics, and we think that they are helpful. And finally, when it comes to long-term markets, also stability, predictability of the framework is important, and hence, because the good hedging, a good correlation depends on sufficient liquidity in the market, on a strong underlying market also, and so CEER Electric is therefore a bit wary of more disruptive proposals that could create a liquidity split in forward markets.
Thank you, Max. I can't help myself because you said you wanted a level playing field, and I mean, doesn't capacity markets fragmentate the internal market?
Well, yes, it's a step away from the energy-only market. That's a very Nordic perspective, I guess. We see that there are resource adequacy needs, and there needs to be a solution to that. There's a structured process. There's a European resource adequacy assessment, or sorry, the ERA.
Yep.
There are NRAs, and member states are not doing whatever they want. There's competition law, and we think that under these circumstances, it can be legitimate to have capacity mechanisms. However, I won't hide from you that there might be divergences inside our membership.
Yeah, it was not my intention to put you on the spot, Max, but I couldn't help myself, being from a Nordic country myself, of course, who at the moment I think is very keen on capacity markets due to a certain production source. With that, I think we can see perhaps the poll result. And a fragmented market is the primary risk, as I see it, and slow implementation. Of course, on that topic, slow implementation, it may be, of course. And then, of course, it doesn't help when you have reforms of the legislation while you're still implementing legislation, perhaps. So not an easy task.
At least investors seem to be confident. The problem is that, at least in our audience.
Yeah. But I think, from this, we can see, a fragmented patchwork. Yeah. So with that, I guess we can go.
Jochen, if I just there are still votes coming in, but on fragmentation. Of course, I already mentioned in my comments about different national realities, and of course, we have to look at the physical constraints and different energy mixes and so on. And I'm confident that we as regulators always do that. But of course, for regulators, it's important that we have this market integration in mind and not allow through our decisions to lead to fragmentation and lower liquidity. And because there can be nuances and national differences, but of course we have to have that in mind and in sight. And about slow implementation, yes, I reckon with Max's point about sometimes it's too slow, but better slow and steady and than too fast with some possible costly mistakes.
A reflection from you, Mathilde, on the Slido.
Yeah, I think indeed there is a risk to go towards a fragmented patchwork of national rules. We saw during the last 5 years lots of national measures being taken. I mean, there's also frameworks for that. I'm thinking in particular of the state aid, different framework that we had in the last years that frame these possible measures. But it's true that if we don't have, and that's why I read this in the introduction, it's very important that we reflect on what are actually the obstacles to market integration. and how we want to overcome them with a common approach. Common doesn't mean identical everywhere, but first to agree on the issue. Do we agree that there is an issue with the congestion in the grid, the way the market design deals with these congestions, and the measures which are taken? Today we see very different national approaches that maybe indeed end up in such a patchwork if we don't sit together, have a debate on these issues and how we want to overcome them realistically, because of course we can build new grids and that's on the way, but we also need to use the infrastructure we have in a better way. On slow implementation, I agree. It's good if it's steady, even better if it's on time, but sometimes it's difficult. But we need also to be very careful that we don't question the rule that we have, because as you rightly pointed out, we are quite at a high pace of legal proposals. So it can also be tempting to say, okay, maybe next legal proposal will question the rules, so I slow down the implementation, and that's also dangerous for the European market.
Yeah, Max.
Yes, I will defend the implementation part. I mean, in general, I mean, slow implementation is a bit. It can hurt the credibility of the market. In general, it's become more difficult in Europe to get things done. But I'm not talking now about the electricity market where we did a lot of things. But there are good reforms in the market design. For example, also, I mean, there's of course the congestion issue, but also volatility, how to integrate renewables, and from a market perspective, the ability for market actors to rebalance themselves closer to real time when they know more exactly how much they will produce. That's a positive development, and hence we support this shorter intraday gate closure time. We recognize, of course, that there are national differences with the phase out of the restoration reserve balancing products. Some more proactive TSOs might have more challenges, but yeah, if possible, derogations should not be maxed out too much. Yeah, and on congestion, maybe I think Eurelectric would also support the idea of having more alignment in congestion management measures, and also as long as services are remunerated. Yeah.
Thank you, Max. I think I draw the conclusion that we need to understand the goal and how to get there. So, as you said, Max, you wanted more stakeholder involvement, for instance. It's sometimes, at least as a NRA, I can say it's difficult. It's very easy to have the industry represented. It's very difficult to get someone representing households, average citizens, so forth. But I think the key is to try at least to sit down and have a same understanding of something, why it's necessary to do something, perhaps, and therefore have a better and faster outcome, which we have tried actually in my own member state. Specifically started out in the north, where we sat down with the grid companies, the industry, because they were fighting literally each other, different opinions, what is a fast connection, what is not a fast connection, and then try to see how can we do this better, and everyone is on board. And of course, it's not only in those cases a matter for our sector, so to say, energy legislation. In Sweden, it's environmental law also, like in most member states. And then you have planning and construction law and so forth. So there are so many ways to appeal something if you don't want it. So I think this understanding, and I think it applies also to the topic for this panel, that we need more understanding among the member states why an integrated market can actually be much more beneficial than we do with fragmented 27 member states. I see Alda.
Yeah, on stakeholder involvement, just to be clear, that, also from experience of NRAs and also having gone through difficult and tough conversations with some of the stakeholders and industry representatives, having engagement does not always mean that we arrive to the point where we completely agree on everything and that we take all the industry views on board. It's also important that we, as regulator, make the point if that is in the interest and try to look for the consumers. And we are looking for this balance between consumer interests, because you already mentioned that it's quite seldom that there is this loud voice from consumers, and that is the task of the regulators to represent the interests and to balance that out against the industry. But it is important, and it was mentioned here a number of times already, that the rules are predictable and they are set and decided in transparent way, and that's something that industry can count on, and even you might not always like what those rules are, but at least there is this confidence and predictability.
Thank you very much, Alda.
And maybe from my side, a comment also on because in this integrated market, and as you said, I mean, even if there is still quite some untapped potential, there were lots of progress in the last decade. It's also growing in terms of complexity, and also for the NRAs to keep the oversight. So it's very important that the NRAs has the resources and the power to perform this oversight, to balance with market parties, system operators' views, and really complete this role in a growing complex environment.
Yeah, and I think this is very valid, and I give you a very personal example. I just installed solar panels on one side of my rooftop, then a battery pack and a charger, and then I have a geothermal pump who is guided by a little gadget. And then I tried to integrate all this, and of course in all this I'm dependent on communication. And of course it failed because I had changed the password divide because some gadgets only work in 2.4 gigahertz. I can't do 5 gigahertz. I had to split my broadband and so forth. And then I had to reinstall all the passwords on all gadgets, and I failed last night with one, so it's down, unfortunately. But I think it illustrates this need to have the same and also to utilize each other's knowledge and experience rather than sit on your own and try to solve it like I did last night.
And probably a good example, because market integration is not only about cross-border flow, it's also about integrating all types of resources, including the decentralized level. And I think you also quoted, Max, in your answers that flexibility are very important. We need to develop them. And the network code that is in the pipe on demand response, we call it demand response, is actually on decentralized resources. I think is a very good example on how we would like to balance market integration with local national specificities, because at the end it will be very local actors, devices, as the one you try to plug into your house, that will get into this market of providing flexibility. So we need to have a framework that is national, but is also within a European market and within certain European boundaries.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess, can integration guidance better help NRAs to adapt EU network codes to national and regional grid conditions?
Is that the question to me, probably, or anyone else who feels like responding to it? But well, the guidance can be helpful in a way, as long as we don't assume that everybody has strictly follow it like a rule book without any deviations, because as Matilde also pointed out, there are national specific circumstances, and flexibility can be exercised in different ways, and it depends on really local actors like yourself in this example. So the guidance might be helpful as long as it gives that flexibility also to NRAs to deal with specific national challenges, as long as NRAs have that in mind, that the market integration should be ensured, so not leading to market fragmentation. In short, I think I'm already repeating myself, but that is something what we have in mind when we consider these different aspects in everyday decisions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alda. Yeah, I think it's very important because I was once told, I'm not an engineer myself, but I was told by an engineer, Johan, even if you succeed to harmonize the legislation, the technical aspect is not identical in the 4 Nordic countries anyway, to begin with. So, yeah. So then I realized it's not that simple to have it only in legal text, but everything is harmonized, because then you have the reality, of course, how, you know. To this example, it was that my own member states consider transmission to start from 220 and above, and then this neighbor recognized transmission already at 130. So you have this, yeah, Max.
Yeah, of course there are a lot of national specificities, but there's also been now progress recently in coordination between capacity calculation regions. In June, the advanced hybrid coupling went live, so improving a bit the coordination of the capacity calculation. There are also projects to expand flow-based methodology to capacity calculation, and those are all projects with which will improve the visibility of the grid across Europe, and then also improve the allocation of resources, and improve trading opportunities across borders. So we support these developments as they are happening at the moment.
Thank you very much. I wonder if we have any questions from the audience. No?
Not for the moment, Johan. You can continue.
Okay.
I don't have a question, just what Max just mentioned. Well, basically you described the different new things that are taking place that leads to supposedly benefits both to producers, consumers, and the system stability and resilience as such. And of course, as regulators, we also argue, of course, in favor of this integration in most cases, and try to highlight these benefits. But of course, in times of crisis, well, Matilde mentioned that, and somebody else in the introduction, we are in a permanent different crisis, living through different type of crisis. In those situations, there tend to be political calls for kind of national specific solutions that are really kind of inward looking, and the challenge for sometimes, like also in if I come back to the Baltics and some of not only Latvia, but also I know from neighbors that when there are suddenly high electricity prices, there is a call to disintegrate and rely on our own resources. But that, of course, is like depending on the weather, like maybe in the spring and in the summer we can be independent, but with lower prices. But of course, in the winter, the picture is quite bleak, and we try to explain that being connected, being integrated, it brings a benefit to the economy and consumers overall. So that is probably also the debate that regulators are sometimes drawn in, and it is our also probably I think that our common task of different stakeholders to explain these benefits.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a good metaphor, but even as a lawyer, you have to take national economics, and especially when I did my master, and I had this professor from Maastricht, and his example was that there were 10 bike manufacturers in Europe, and I think, if I recall the example correct, his example was that 8 of them made losses all the time. And then the question was, is it more efficient then that the 2 ones who make profits should stay on the market and the other ones should perhaps start doing something else than producing bikes? So, but I think it brings back this idea of integration, that we don't have to solve everything one by one, but we can rely on our neighbors. And of course that requires good interconnection and full capacity to the market to utilize that interconnection capacity.
Maybe on this point, and also related to this European versus regional or local specificities, I think the Baltic example is very interesting when it comes to pooling of reserves. So you have a mechanism of pooling your reserves that enables to lower the overall amount of reserves. And that's a very interesting one, because here there is clearly a gain of going together that doesn't harm the liquidity of the balancing markets, because still the European platforms are used and ongoing. So it's an example that shows that regional cooperation can bring benefits without fragmentation. Another example which comes to my mind, more in the history, is so you quoted the progress of flow-based market coupling. At the very start of the flow-based, only the Central Western Europe side countries went flow-based because they were ready, and that did not end up into fragmenting the market, but rather giving the chance to early movers to implement, to test it in reality, and then others progressively to join. So it's also another illustration of how, working with its neighbors directly can then help building this European market, which, by the way, has been very much of a bottom-up construction.
Yeah, and if I take my own region, of course, we came from a completely different angle, because we realized apparently already 25 years plus ago that we were so small, so it didn't make sense to be 4 different markets. So we started trading as one large market with no congestion. That's the system price model. And then you, of course, can hedge with the deliverance. Back then it was called the contract for difference for the zones where the deliverance. Now it's called EPADs to make sure, because there are so many contracts for difference for different things, of course. So with that, we have a question from the audience.
Yes, we have a question from the audience, and I think it's maybe slightly provocative, but very much on point, which is a question about the link to network charges and market fragmentation that we're kind of discussing now. And the question is, does creating exemptions or benefits for certain consumer groups in different countries doesn't risk creating some distortions?
Yeah, I guess I take the advantage of being the moderator and let the panel answer first. So Mathilde.
Maybe I take the joker that I cannot comment on an ongoing proposal. No, I'm joking. Indeed, it's a key question. Exemptions. I think it's really about money flows. If you exempt a category of users, the other are paying, and that's a reality we need to be clear about. The key principle that should underlie any exemption or any special treatment is a cost reflectivity. Now I think we get back to this European versus national discussion. I think national network charges are really a very good example. They are designed nationally, but we need a European framework. We need principles, so that's what the Article 18 of the regulation is doing, and that the proposal will further improve, hopefully. But it's about giving a European framework that enable then NRAs to do their mission of setting the tariffs in this framework, and exemptions should be part of this, how they are done, and this principle of cost reflectivity, which is really key.
I would, as being head of national NRA, I would absolutely agree about this principle of cost reflectivity. And of course, we are all waiting for July 15, when we can see this approved draft proposal and can start formally considering and discussing it. Of course, there have been also some worries by NRAs on how much it might interfere with the competence of national and independent regulators' tasks. So we are slightly cautious on how it will turn out to be, of course, also in the discussions in the Council. So we are prepared to be engaged, but getting back to the main point, indeed, cost reflectivity is something, and also having this national flexibility to be reflected in network charges. Which should be up to NRAs to decide. That's crucial for us.
Thank you, Ella. Max, any thoughts?
Yeah, I might have to draw a joker here. I think, we in general, when it comes to network charges, maybe something I can say is that we think that they should that the network charges for electricity compared to other energy carriers should be a bit more fair. I don't know if this will be addressed there. That's also a question of the taxation, energy taxation regulation. But this is something we find very important in terms of network charges. But yeah, I won't comment on the draft at this point.
Thank you, Max. Okay, I'm not restricted in that sense. I can be more blunt, perhaps.
Can I ask to Max about what do you mean by being more fair? Just to clarify that.
I think it's just that the taxes on electricity are usually higher than on fossil fuels. I mean, also probably for affordability reasons, but in looking at the electrification strategy, decarbonization strategy, we think that artificial components shouldn't be in the network charges. Yeah.
Artificial components like taxes, yeah, indeed. But you're right. Of course, there are national differences if we look from the European perspective. It's just that we have a national also discussion about what is fair in terms of generators against large industrial consumers, and so each of them feel unfairly treated in some way, and that is like endless debate, and we as regulators try to strike the balance and carefully maintain it.
My personal reflection on this is, of course, as Max just mentioned, is the taxes. I mean, I can take myself an example. The largest portion of my grid tariff is taxes. Because, I don't know, when I went to law school, I was taught that you cannot have tax on tax. But apparently you can have it on electricity and transmission of electricity or distribution of electricity. So I have electricity tax, and then on top of that I have a VAT. So for me, at least, right or wrong, I interpret this as tax and tax. So I think as the Commission also gave a hint to the member state to lower, or for affordability, the quickest way is to lower the tax. Because that the member state has completely control over. I don't know how many it actually did. Maybe you don't know either, Mathilde. But it's always an option, of course. Okay, no further questions from the audience? Okay, I think we'll stop here, and I thank you for your participation and lively interventions. Unless you want to say something final.
Maybe, yeah. I start on final remarks to conclude what I had going through my mind listening to our discussions is that I think the regulators do not question the benefits of market integration, but it is about the implementation and at national level, national regulatory authorities are the closest to national reality, and it's important that decisions of NRAs reflect on different system needs, physical realities, and do not distort market signals, that we indeed address local challenges that are there.
Very good, Alda. Because personally I believe non-distorted price signal is the best signal.
I think maybe one word from my side. As I said, I think it's worth pointing out that the European market has been very much a bottom-up creation. Indeed, sometimes now it requires changing a bit the setting because, as it was pointed out, now some tasks may lack a bit of regulatory oversight or the possibility to really follow up their implementation. So we need to rebalance a bit how this is governed. But it's important that this construction is still ongoing and is not seen as a bottom-up theoretical target.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I would say also that when thinking about subsidiarity, I think that's a very important principle for NRAs. It doesn't mean that that one level has to decide about everything, but that the tasks are carried out where they are the most effective. And if we follow that compass in looking where something can be improved, I think that we can find a good balance.
Yeah. And I think we have a court in Luxembourg who will make sure of it if we ends up there. So thank you very much. And with that, we will go to, as they say on television in most member states for the time being, a hydration break. And we will welcome you back in due time.
Yes, just jumping in, Johan, to thank you everyone for this wonderful panel. Indeed, we have this hydration break, very topical with the World Cup at the moment. Before that, just to tease the second panel that we talk about grids, and we'll also, of course, have a keynote speech by Eamon Ryan before that first panel. So just before the break, I'm leaving you online with two questions that you can answer already during the break, just to feed the conversation on the grids discussion in the panel. Two very simple questions. The first one is, what is the main bottleneck to funding cross-border grids? We're really eager to know what you think. Is it mismatch between who pays and who gets the benefits, financial predictability, EU planning and national planning, or complex coordination? And then the solution, right? Where or what should regulator focus on to speed up large-scale grid funding? And again, we have 4 answers: EU-level funding, EU cost sharing, national authorities and flexibility, or using shared data. And the data is, I think, also a very important point. So we'll leave these questions online during the break, so take your time to answer, and we'll be back in exactly 20 minutes for the second panel and the keynote speech. Thank you very much.
Through CEER Women in Energy initiative, we are consistently working to bring professionals together to share experiences and support gender equality in the sector. Enjoy, learn and reflect, and make this an amazing away day with lots of positive energy.
My experience as a woman studying in the energy sector has been both challenging and very rewarding. Through my thesis, The Role of Regulators in European Energy Crisis, I've engaged with many inspiring women who have taught me so much about this field that is constantly evolving thanks to them.
Inclusion, equality, fairness are important principles in themselves, but they're also important because they help us get better result, whatever it is we're doing. We need to make sure everyone is represented. If we only speak to half the population, we're going to miss half of the good ideas and opportunities that are there.
We will continue to fully support this Women in Energy initiative in the future.
Within the EU4Energy Phase 3 project that is funded by the European Union and implemented by CEER, a clean energy transition and connectivity in the Eastern Partnership countries is supported. However, we all agree that apart from policies and regulatory frameworks, the real success depends on people and on making sure that women take active role in the process.
It is important for CEER to organize these gatherings because they allow to create visibility, connection and confidence among women to exchange in networking events and acknowledge each achievement.
rolled up, tossed down, trying to understand why my lives don't sound. Oh, I'm holed up, locked down, shut in, held down.
There you are, right out of bed, the lucky child I never had. Is this my life? It's not too bad. Soon rolled up, lost out.
Roll with, without. I finally see the sun through all of those clouds. Hold up, locked down, shut in, held down.
Don't be afraid to leave it all behind. Tomorrow is a new day. Back up and get out of here. We're driving tonight. I'll turn you back. Roll out.
So lover, which way have you moved? It's been a while since our bodies grooved. Cosmic love gave you something gold, so you wrap it all up and take it. Suddenly it's all real, suddenly it's how you feel. You're free now, somehow. Suddenly it's all real, suddenly it's how you feel. You're free now, you're all you have to give. The unknown now, the unknown now, the unknown now, the unknown now. Real things you found, you feel a little younger, and you begin to wonder, what is it you want to love? What is it you want to love? What is it you want to love? Suddenly it's all real, suddenly it's how you feel. You're free now, somehow. Suddenly it's all real, suddenly it's how you feel. You're free now, you're all you have to give. The unknown now, the unknown now, the unknown now, the unknown now. corners of the world, adored by the sun's rays. What's left to do but to feel it all? You're alive now, to die is dust. Nothing less or something more. Something more.
There were too many people at the party making faces. I don't wanna be a part of it with the beautiful people. And there you are, drinking Coca-Cola, shaking your Polaroid picture. Don't try to explain it, I think that we feel the same here. And all the girls must be models. You're sipping up on margaritas, twist their bodies so beautiful, making shapes with the music. He got it all in a photograph, and he mocked it with Nick named it a boy. And so kiss me deeply here, that's for you. Oh, oh. But all I wanna know is what you think about me, party boy. All I wanna know is what you think about me, party And there were too many people at the party in bikinis. They poured that Belvedere vodka into the smoke glass martinis. And there you are in the corner, smoking a cloud just for cover. His name engraved in his flask, so I don't have to ask. And all the girls must be dancers. They're getting up on the tables, turning their bodies to liquid so smooth in all the right places. He held a friend with his fingers and blinked a knife for the trigger. Said it all in the suit. I'm glad that's not you. But all I wanna know is what you think about me, party boy. All I wanna know is what you think about me, party boy. All I wanna know is what you think about me, party boy. All I wanna know is what you think about me, party boy. Oh, every part of me wants every part of you. Oh, you're so different. You're my perfect kind of fool. Oh, every part of me wants every part of you. 'Cause you're so different. You're my perfect kind of fool. All I wanna know is what you think about me, party boy. All I wanna know is what you think about me, party boy. All I wanna know is what you think about me, party boy. All I wanna know is what you think about me, party boy.
Something about you. There's 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 something about you. about you. There's something 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 about you. What about a hit? What about a hit of your love? Start to shake. Start to shake with your hand. Will it ever click? Will it ever click? Are you a freak? You turn and face me. Maybe this time I'll choose. What about a hit? What about a hit of your love? Start to shake. Start to shake with your hand. Will it ever click? Will it ever click? Are you a freak? You turn and face me. Maybe this time I'll choose. What about a hit of your love? Start to shake with your hand. Will it ever click? Are you a freak? Maybe this time I'll choose. What about a hit of your love? Start to shake with your hand. Will it ever click? Are you a freak? You turn and face me. Maybe this time I'll choose. Closer, closer, closer. You turn and face me. Maybe this time I'll choose. Closer. Closer. You turn and face me. Maybe this time I'll choose. Closer. Closer. You turn and face me. Maybe this time I'll choose. There's something about you. 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 There's something about you.
And welcome back to this CEER 2026 Annual Conference. I'm really glad to have with us now Eamon Ryan, Associate at Caltrais Europe and E3G, and also former Energy Minister in the Irish government, for the the second keynote speech. Eamon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me online. I'm very honoured to be here. To share some thinking with our regulators. And as you say, I'm able to answer that question that was put just before the break. What's the main bottleneck to funding offshore grids? And in answering that, what I was hoping to do is focus very much on the North Seas. The same lessons may well apply in the Baltic or in the southeast or in southwest of Europe, but the North Seas is where I've been working for the last 20 years in thinking about how we develop offshore energy, and therefore I want to just share some of that experience, and maybe just set some historical context to frame the discussion that's going to follow here on the panel. I go back because and that word North Seas is very important. It includes the Irish Sea, the Celtic Sea, the Atlantic in my mind. It's not just defining North Seas as being the North Sea. We need to think bigger and slightly broader. We developed our first offshore wind farm, I think it was about the second or third in Europe, in the Irish Sea back as far as 2004, I think it was, 22 years ago. And I recall that time, I was very fortunate to be Energy Minister from 2008 to 2011. And we achieved an incredible amount in terms of setting up the structures that we were benefiting from today, the decoupling of our electricity systems, the renewables targets, the efficiency directives, all that that didn't happen by accident. It came from political commitment and decision making. I recall back in 2010, that having achieved a lot of those original first building blocks of creating a competitive, cleaner electricity market, we started, if I recall rightly, it was in the SET plan. Andrea Peebalg's the commissioner at the time, and actually thinking about a lot of what we're still talking about today. 10 ministers came together to sign the North Sea's Offshore Grid Initiative Agreement, political signal, and it came from the ministers. And it was, and very much looking at regional electricity markets, similar to what we're looking at and thinking about today as a step towards a wider European integrated market. It was the time of the financial crash, so it wasn't a huge amount of investment happening in 2010, 11, 12, 13. But in those slight 3 or 4 years later, we started to see a real dramatic leap. Created by the auction system. I think Denmark was at first, Germany, UK, Holland, all putting in these new auction systems that actually showed you could bring the price right down. And that was a transformative leap. That kind of defied maybe what the expectations were around offshore wind and showed we could prove the technology, prove the economics, and start to see really significant building going on right across the North Seas area, more than anywhere else in the world, actually, leading this development of offshore. From 2015 onwards, up to 2020, that continued, but started to run into supply chain difficulties, started to run into some of the cost difficulties. And also we were realizing at the time that if we just built out on a point-to-point connection system, the coast here on Northwest Europe would be pockmarked with converter stations, which you don't want, sensitive short coast, but also that it would be very expensive. And also relying in this just project by project, individual project basis, the supply chain, be you a port or be you a turbine manufacturer, be you a cable company, be you a shipping company, that sort of stop-start, one project here, one project there, but no real coordinated project pipeline, was starting to see prices to step up. And that, I think, if I was looking at the phases, how this has moved on politically, led in the more recent 5 years towards a series of political commitments to action towards this great project. Firstly in Ellsberg, and then in Ostend, and then lastly in this January in Hamburg, Prime Minister level coming in and making real commitments. We're going to build 120 gigawatts by 2030 of offshore wind in the North Seas alone. 300 by 2050, 100 of that being meshed into connected offshore grid projects to help bring the transmission costs down and make the economics work. So there was a recognition that, okay, we had started well, we've developed an offshore industry, but the costs are starting to go up because the supply chain is uncertain and pressurized, because the transmission cost is very high, because it's not coordinated, it's all point-to-point, and it's not really working in a cost-sharing, benefit and cost-sharing basis. We've yet to find a way of integrating it in the same way that onshore electricity generation had happened. So at that very high political level, President Macron, Chancellor Merz, all the other Keir Starmer, whatever, coming to kind of say, yes, we really want to make this happen and we need to take a leap and a step forward. And I would say where we are now, I think it's a point of similar sort of change. I mean, we're coming from that huge sway, 25 pieces of legislation in the last mandate towards decarbonisation, and then a certain wariness or weariness of that in the last year or two. But that turning again, in my mind, in the last year, backed up by what Enrico Letta, Mario Draghi is saying, that it's all about the grid, our competitiveness. It's all about developing more integrated energy, particularly electricity markets, if we want to be competitive and secure. And then I would argue very significantly, even in the last 3 to 6 months, because of the war in the Strait of Hormuz as well as in Ukraine, a recognition that all that wariness about the decarbonisation agenda was ignoring the fact that we would never be competitive by burning other people's fossil fuels. And that maybe looking back at the response to the Ukrainian crisis, we made some mistakes. We rushed off and bought gas elsewhere as our first response. We spent our entire time rowing about whether you put a price on gas, market caps, which weren't going to work. Rowing between nuclear and renewables. I think to a certain extent we are now moving beyond that. And in my mind, in the Accelerate EU strategy, there is the real heart of a European competitiveness industrial strategy. We electrify everything. We do that by bringing down the cost of electricity as our most important objective, because the truth is electricity demand is reducing in Europe at the moment. So if we're going to scale up, build grid, if we're going to scale up and put in new generation, we have to have the demand to cover the cost. And that requires us to bring down the price, whether that's through taxation, lowering taxes, whether it's through more flexibility, more efficient use of the existing grid, or changing the financing costs. Is subject for debate. But the core strategic argument, I think, is increasingly realization that actually we need to bring down the price of electricity in everything we do. If we're where we are now, and I'm coming at this from a very political perspective, that's my own background and my own expertise, I'd say there are 3 or 4 different developments that are significant. Firstly, and I'm thinking North Seas obviously here, it's absolutely critical that we get the United Kingdom back into the electricity market in a functioning way. And back into the North Seas Energy Cooperation. They're there as observer status. They need to be fully integrated, because in truth, we will not have an effective regional electricity market if you take that 90 gigawatt lump of load and demand out of the picture. And particularly when it comes to developing offshore, they're an essential part of the project. They've got great financing capability and have great development capability. They've probably been ahead of most other countries in terms of how you get the contract auction systems working. But also the savings come when you have a regional balancing market. And when you can, in the North Seas particularly, you cannot exclude the United Kingdom. And those negotiations, I was in London last week, it's not looking great. It's still, I feel slightly fearful that the Commission is dragging its heels a bit. Still bitter at Brexit, rightly and understandably, but we need to move on from that. We need to start integrating the UK into this next day electricity market, make sure that they are interconnected into whatever we're doing in ETS and CBAM. And that's an important element of us getting the North Seas element right. Secondly, I would argue, and again, it's slightly political, the French government have a key role. Because in truth, in recent years, and talking directly to the French colleagues, they could say, why would we need to integrate? We have our big load of nuclear fleet, 60 gigawatts, we can extend the lifetime for another 20 years, we should be fine. Except it can't be cooled at the moment, but also that would miss an opportunity to use that baseload French nuclear to provide for data centres, which we do need in Europe. Perfect match, baseload demand, baseload production, and that, which already seems to me is starting with that SoftBank deal in recent weeks, gives the case and the need for the French to integrate with its neighbours so that that regional electricity market works in a really flexible way. I'd include right down to Spain, but particularly in the North Seas and with its immediate neighbours, UK, Belgium, Holland, Germany, and Ireland. Thirdly, just on the political aspect, as I said, in response to the crisis in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, there was first instinct from my German colleagues and friends was to rush off and buy gas in the US or in Qatar or Namibia, or wherever you get it. I think the day of relying on gas is over, because we know it's not secure from any of those quarters, let alone from our east. And to join what I see now is a cohesion within the Commission, where President von der Leyen has very much understood that the Accelerate EU strategy is the only way forward. Vice President Teresa Ribera similarly aligned, and Dan Jorgensen and DG Ener. There's complete alignment, in my mind, in the Commission, which wasn't always there in recent years when it comes to key energy projects. That is there now. We need to match it in the Council of Ministers so you create the political certainty, which was the first prerequisite in lowering the cost of capital and lowering the cost of financing of these big capital projects. I think I'm encouraged by what I saw last week in the grids package getting through the council. Has to be negotiated now with the Parliament. There were changes, but they weren't fundamental or significant. I think it's particularly important as we deliver that, and we'll see what's in the electrification plan on the 15th of July to support it and back it up. I think it's particularly important that the North Seas Energy Cooperation Institution, which has a role under the grids plan in helping plan, coordinate, prioritise investment in projects of common interest, that it needs to become a far more active, rigorous, effective player. In truth, while we've set up the institutions in the last 15 years, ongoing work in various work streams within NSEC, previously called NSCOGI, it hasn't actually been able to take that mandate being given at the highest political level, prime ministerial level, and turn it into deliverable actions. And that needs to change, in my mind, is the first most important thing, that it raises its ambition as to what actually its mandate is and its ability to act is, using whatever the final grids package as a tool to start delivering the integrated, the meshed part, which is the bit we have not yet done at all, really, in any scale. And that requires all sorts of complex, that requires probably regulators to be engaged with NSEC directly. I was talking to someone earlier saying that's a glaring gap, that they're not actually members. Well, if that needs to be to get over the inability to do cost and benefit sharing on a regional, inter-country basis, then that change needs to come. That institution cannot stay the same. It has to scale up in its capability and its ability. Secondly, just to answer the question, I'll conclude on this. 2 points, maybe, if I can. In terms of answer that question, addressing the bottleneck in funding and how do we address that? I think in offshore wind and offshore transmission grids, that has to come from a European approach. That the very nature of when you're out in mid-North Sea or mid-Bay of Biscay or whichever, mid-Irish Sea, it is by definition a different characteristic to onshore development. And I believe it does require a coordinated European approach, including in determining the financing capability and the funding and allocation, cost and funding allocations. That has to be a European competence because by definition we are between markets. I think the one particular opportunity I would love to see, and I hope this is in the electrification plan on the 15th of July, is that we might start looking at cost allocation mechanisms for grid, where you look at it as possibly a 40-year payback, where you smooth out in early years lower interest rates with a higher allocation later on, which reduces the cost of capital in the first 10, 15, 20 years. We need that to be able to get projects up and running. We need that to be able to get the demand increase that then covers the cost eventually. And that will require change to European competition rules, but I think it can be done, particularly in the North Seas, if it is seen as a European project, European funding and cost allocation mechanism. And that may require equity from public sources to help cover that cost. You can't put it in the TSO's balance sheets, as we were talking to someone earlier on. But that public equity, in my mind, could and should come from some of the national ETS revenues, 90% of ETS going to national governments at the moment, going here, there and everywhere. If we put some of the ETS revenues into the grid, that actually is a major boost for all sides of the economy. Every technology benefits because that access to cheap power benefits everyone. And I think that's an example of an equity contribution that could come from the likes of ETS revenues, is the sort of way that we might help lower the costs. Lastly, I'd say this in terms of lowering costs, which has to be our absolute North Star, most important mechanism. Part of the problem we have as well, talking to developers, is that their costs in terms, be it shipping, cabling, substations, transformers, foundations, turbines, are all increasing because of this lack of a consistent scale order book for those producer companies. And I think part of what we need to do, as well as focusing on the grid, is to get European coordination around what the supply chain is, particularly if we're going to put in measures to restrict Chinese imports. That is the time when at the same time we say, and we coordinate this offshore financing, grid development, with a clear production schedule that helps reduce the cost of the supply chain, which is our other major problem in terms of why costs, compared to where they were in 2015-16 when it was a nice sweet spot, that's why they've gone up. And I think that has to be addressed in how you order and organize this. It's bringing supply chain certainty to bring supply chain costs down. That combined with lower financing costs, lowering the weighted average WACC through some sort of public equity support, are the two mechanisms, I think, in a European coordinated approach that could really see the North Seas take off. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Iman. I couldn't think of a better way to introduce this second panel. So now I will invite Koen Lockett, Craig President and CEER Vice President to come and moderate the panel, and also Ines Boisida and Andrea Zevnik to join us. Thank you very much. I would just remind everyone online that you can ask any question you want on the Q&A box. And we might also take the advantage of having Iman and others here to maybe ask questions from the room, but please do ask questions online if you have any for our participants. And now, Koen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, welcome everybody. I think we will talk a little bit about certain aspects that which were already raised by our keynote speaker. But first of all, I will ask to the panel to introduce themselves shortly, to give some background. It makes things easier for questions eventually.
I am Ines Boisida. I work at IDRI, the Institute for Sustainable Development and International Relations. We're a think tank based in Paris, and we are a policy center, independent, working on the energy transition and sustainability.
Thank you. Andrea?
Yes, hello, good afternoon also from my side, and thank you for inviting ENTSO-E to contribute to the discussion. My name is Andrea Zevnik. Today I'm in function of Finance Advisory Group of ENTSO-E Board. So this is the group which mainly deals with financial topics that we are currently facing in all TSOs in Europe. Can I be a little bit longer than Ines?
No problem.
Yeah, it's no problem. I think that we have enough time. So just to put a little bit of context on our role. So with colleagues, we are dealing together on strategic challenges, how to ensure that Europe electricity grid remain financeable throughout the unprecedented investment cycle that we are facing, and how to keep the energy transition affordable along the way. Today we heard quite a lot about financeability and also about affordability. I think that these two words are you can meet them everywhere. But to be clear, what is actually financeability means for us? It's usually connected with access to capital, but in reality, it is equally about the ability to raise capital and deploy that capital efficiently. And also, because we are today in the regulatory environment or community, it's also important to recover it through stable, predictable, and forward-looking regulatory frameworks. So these three dimensions are very important for us. Of course, we can look at this from different time perspective, but in general, this is something that is important for us. And maybe I could end here, and I will tackle the other topics through the questions.
Thank you. Our third panelist is online, Mark from Ofgem. Can you hear me?
I can't hear.
Hello? Mark, you're muted. We cannot hear you.
Okay, I think, is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Excellent. No, thank you, Karen. I'm sorry I can't be in the room with you this afternoon, but I'm really delighted to be able to join the panel for this session. Let me perhaps adjust my speaker here to avoid that. Maybe get rid of some echo at your end. Can you hear me okay now?
It's very clear.
Good. So my name is Kevin Magner. I'm a senior policy manager in the Future Connection team at Ofgem, the energy regulator for grid. I work with B. Filkin and Nick Pitarello here at Ofgem, who some of you may know from previous work. Before joining Ofgem 3 years ago, I worked in power and infrastructure financing, advice at Deloitte and Schroders Investment Bank before that. At Ofgem, I work on developing our policy for offshore hybrid assets, including multi-purpose interconnectors. And we have approved in our initial project assessment process 2 pilot projects of offshore hybrid assets with fellow regulators, yourselves, Craig in Belgium, and also in Netherlands. And we look after the regulation of the Great Britain part of the Nautilus and Lion Link offshore hybrid asset projects as they proceed. And then at the North Sea Summit in Hamburg this January, the UK and Germany agreed a joint declaration of intent to deepen cooperation on the development of North Sea energy infrastructure with a particular focus on offshore hybrid assets. So we're continuing to develop our offshore hybrid asset policy in collaboration with the government here, the Department of Energy, Security, Net Zero, and that's in particular towards multi-purpose interconnectors. We keep in touch with the work of the Offshore TSO Cooperation Group via the GB National Energy System Operator and National Grid. And the other context to it is also the GB moving towards a more strategically planned working offshore, and we work with government and NESO in that area. So delighted to be with you this afternoon and really interested to discuss this whole. I kind of come at it from developing our regulations and looking at specific projects. In some ways, I suppose trying to get full initial step might help the bigger mesh in time.
Thank you. Okay. Let's start with some questions for the panelists. Maybe first, yeah.
Yeah, so, sorry, I think I didn't have time to do my initial remarks.
Oh, yeah.
I was a bit confused with the introduction versus introductory remarks. So sorry, and sorry that the connection maybe is not great with the UK at the moment. I think what's interesting to remember when we talk about regulation of European grids in the context of climate neutrality is that there are 3 things that we're facing when it comes to climate neutrality as Europeans. First, there's the new challenge that electrification of end users brings, as well as integration of variable renewables. And then there's, of course, the phase out of fossil assets. And finally, new geopolitical shocks, also attacks on our grid, so security. And I think these 3 main challenges are changing in scale around the time we're going through. And that's also why we're questioning the regulatory framework for grids. And I think what's interesting when you look at those three problems, right, those three issues, is that EU geographical integration contributes to solving or helping with each of them. So looking at harnessing the benefits of variable renewables, having closer cross-border interconnection helps. It also helps affordability in general. And I think for this, I mean, we can discuss the specifics of how it affects different geographies, how it affects different clients, different consumers, but overall, we have had analyses that show this quite clearly. We have had several of them. And most recently, maybe I can quote an analysis done by the German think tank Agora Energiewende together with Fraunhofer Institute and Define. They find that we can have economic savings of 560 billion euros in total system costs from 2030 to 2050, thanks to integration, both at the geographical level and with vectoral integration. And so that's a sort of horizon to keep in mind. And I think to link with what is interesting for us today, which is of course regulation, it sort of it makes us face a paradox, right? That we have the fact that we have historical challenges for the grids, and we know that doing it in an EU way, advancing as Europeans, helps us with costs. But at the same time, the way that we plan the grid and the way that we recover the costs of grids is mostly at the national level. And so that brings us to a sort of tension. And that's why it brings maybe forward cracks or gaps in a regulatory framework that were easier to forget before, maybe. And as an example, maybe I can talk about the French example, because I work from France, so maybe that's easier for me. And I know that Eamon mentioned it earlier in the keynote. The position of the French TSO has moved on a little bit in the past years. If you look at planning documents of the last decade, it was quite clear that the French TSO, their message was, whatever new interconnection we build, it will be no regret for us. It will be at a benefit for our system. And now in their last national development plan, they say, beyond what is already being constructed, what is already planned, if we want new capacity at the border, we need national or domestic reinforcements that we wouldn't have had to invest in without those cross-border capacities. And so, and otherwise, that it would come at overbearing costs for French consumers. And whether you think that that assessment is true or not true, I think it brings a paradox. It's an example of what I was trying to say, that we know that we need to work together, and at the same time, our mechanisms and cost sharing are mostly happening at the national level.
Thank you. You already touched on a lot of elements of the discussion, I think, to the essence already. But anyway, I want to ask you, even if you will repeat some things, but maybe you have some new insights also. From your point of view and working in the sustainable development and working on climate decarbonization and so on, which are the critical concerns in how we, let's say the NRAs, but also the European Commission, is approaching the cost allocation for infrastructure investments? There are a lot of aspects. I don't ask you to tackle all of those aspects, but maybe some are interesting to hear your vision on it.
I would say I have two main concerns. One is that we're lacking an overall EU vision on how the grid is supposed to develop. And when I say this, I'm not saying we need an EU top-down vision that everyone needs to comply with. I think that would be maybe the most extreme point, and I don't think that's the way to go. But what's lacking is we have national visions that are, to different degrees, discussed. They're the objective policy discussions at the national level, with different stakeholders, with different, consultations, scientific assessment, etc. And then at the EU level, we sort of aggregate these national visions, but we don't really have an area or an arena, a room to discuss what are the trade-offs that come with grid planning. And we know that the more we move towards climate neutrality, electrification, and geographical integration, the more we will need to have to do trade-offs between different types of different policy orientations we can have for the grid. So the fact that we don't really have enough, scenarios or studies that are produced at the EU level to really support these policy discussions, that's lacking, and that's also why when you're in a bilateral discussion, and I mean that's your work, right, as national regulators, when you're in a national discussion with the neighbor of who's paying for what regarding the interconnection, one will say, I think that the interconnection, this project is really useful and it will help you because you will do this and this and that. And the other one can say, well, what I see in the future is actually that. And then you can't really agree on cost allocation because you didn't agree on a general long-term pathway or target. And that's one main gap, I think, that is slowing us down. And another aspect that I think is quite important, and it's echoing what I just said, is that since we don't have an EU perspective on where the grid should go or how or the different ways that the grid could go while also reaching climate neutrality, we're only seeing it as a technical exercise of sort of adding up projects. But we're sort of lacking the tools, the technical and political tools to say this project has more priority than that project, or saying that if this project is made but that one is not made, then we will have a problem. And that's also when France says, I can't add capacity at the border if I don't reinforce the grid within France. It's also what they're saying in a sense. And right now, when we have a PCI, PMI list, it's a list of projects. There's no order between them, and you can see the point, from a funding perspective and an EU coordination perspective. But I think it would be interesting to sort of map out the different ways that the grid could go and how projects relate to each other. And I mean cross-border project as well as reinforcements in domestic grids. And for now, we're sort of stuck, or at least we're really focused on the technical exercise that it is, and it's really important. But it's also more than that, and that will grow.
Thank you, and you touched already upon one of the other questions we'll ask later on for our representative from the TSO world. But first of all, for Andrea, so TSOs are facing a huge amount of investments we never saw in the past. It's a real challenge. It's a challenge for the TSOs, it's a challenge for the NRAs. But even if our keynote speaker touched on certain aspects, in your view, from your point of view, from TSO point of view, which are the main barriers for TSOs to execute, let's say, the investment plans and to fulfill the expectations of the European Union regarding the grid investment plans and the European project regarding infrastructure?
Ines actually made a quite good entrance to the topic, so thank you very much. But maybe to put some light on the real figures with what we are dealing currently. So NSOE estimates more than 800 billion of transmission investment by 2050, with around more than 500 billion already needed by 2030. And this actual 10-year network development plan, which is the edition of 2024, tells us something equally important, that every euro invested in the grid will save us 2 euros of costs in the future. So this puts in the position also the immense pressure that we have to deploy the investments, and to deploy the investments we have to find sources, different sources. We have of course NRA in the equation, but also European Commission. I would say that this is not a single task for TSOs. It's a huge challenge for us, but at the same time, it asks from us to put to perform a very active dialogue with policymakers, with regulators, of course, also with owners in some cases, because TSO's environment is also from this perspective very diverse. Some of us are state-owned, some are partially private, some are private as a whole. So this is another perspective that makes challenge even harder, even bigger. But you asked me what are the main obstacles. I would say, I mentioned at the beginning already that financeability is one of the obstacles, how to perform this. So maybe from TSO's perspective, smaller one. I'm actually coming from Slovenian transmission system operator. This is like a question whether regulation will give us a stable framework to attract capital, the part that we are not get from the regulation itself. And the second quite important obstacle, I think that we are quite aligned as a TSO community here, is delivery. Because even if you have as much money as you want and you need, we are still on the market of, we are still facing the permitting procedures, which are lengthy, I think, that all over the Europe. We are facing the obstacles in supply chains. We are part of the competition globally in manufacturing. So we are facing the problem that we are we are competing for the same materials on a global market, which is maybe richer than we are. And of course, one of the delivery problem is also workforce. I think that in Europe we are all facing the workforce, equipped, educated workforce shortages. And as a third, not obstacles or challenge, I would connect also to Ines. What Ines was trying to tell us is that our role is moving from classical infrastructure companies, which in the past we were just building transmission lines and substations, but now we invest money and time also in stability, in resilience, in cybersecurity. And this is something that it doesn't have always a concrete something to have in hands. So we, in our discussion with regulators, we always try to put on that regulation needs to evolve alongside with this changing environment. And currently, I think that that regulation is stepping behind our needs.
Thank you. Yes, regulation is sometimes stepping
yeah, maybe just another remark. That's why also, because we are discussing a lot efficiency at the moment, and efficiency is one thing that is easily measurable through the cost efficiency. But now we are facing the period that this is not the right way anymore. So the efficiency now is strongly connected with the timely implementation of investment, with secure operation, and with resilient infrastructure.
I understand. Thank you. Maybe I can add also, coming from the NRA side, efficiency, we are looking always into the costs, of course, and we are trying to meet our challenges put forward by the European Commission, because we have to defend the interest of the customers. So it's a hard task for us, hard time. And so I jump into to Mark, we heard here some concerns from TSO side. We already know that's a reality. But as lucky Ofgem is still member from CEER, and we from Belgium, from CREC, we are very happy to work with you on a very friendly, in a very friendly way. It's effective, very efficient. But from your side, taking into account the huge amount of investments, the costs, especially you, you're working also on complex projects, investment projects. You already named the Lion Link, Nautilus, and others. Sometimes the costs are there in the beginning, the benefits are not immediately there from the beginning, so the benefits are not covering the costs. How do you see that, and did Ofgem took some measures to protect the domestic customers as well, the residential one as the industry, because everybody's facing his bill. So did Ofgem face or had some initiatives to protect the customers from a too much increasing bill?
Yeah, thank you, Ken. I mean, certainly, together with government, we have had to work together in the past years in the energy crisis period to protect consumers, most particularly in the crisis period, and when there was kind of risk of failure of electricity supplier companies as well. But in the area maybe of the cross-border infrastructure projects, it's more maybe looking into the future and how we kind of represent the consumer interest there. And the way our kind of mandate is expressed, we have to protect existing and future consumers. So that it is intended to sort of balance, over the long term. It's not only the short term consumer interest, but also the future and longer term interest. And then earlier this year, our mandate has been developed a bit further as part of what's called the Ofgem review by government here, and they've added on 2 further duties to go alongside the consumer one. The first of those additional ones is facilitating net zero. And then there's a third, which is to promote economic growth. So we have kind of 3 big objectives that we have to balance, and of which one is the existing and the future consumer. So we do have to look at it from quite a few different perspectives as to what is the consumer interest, and that's not only the cheapest possible electricity as soon as possible. There's a longer term dimension to it. And then when we kind of turned to sort of looking at the regulatory frameworks and so on for these new hybrid assets, or maybe in the future further into more ambitious meshed grids and things, we do try to look too to see kind of where will the efficiencies be kind of coming from, that where we might be, example in hybrid assets, where we can save having some assets, having fewer on land converter stations, for example, maybe less cable, where we can remove some duplication, so that we try to keep a focus on the kind of objectives of these sort of benefits and efficiencies as well. I mean, obviously there's a lot of pressure about first of a kind risks, or the extra costs of doing something for the first time, and then those are real, but we also try to balance it with looking at where can there be the savings, and so forth. And we think that in the way we approach the projects, and we think it's good to do this collaboratively across border, trying to keep a good focus on those benefits and how they will be realized is very important. But to the point you made, yeah, I mean, is that the benefits might not fall in the same way all the time, or they may not match up in the early years, and we would certainly recognize that. I think our main perspective is that when two or more countries kind of go into these sort of cross-border or joint projects, the importance of kind of looking at it over the long term of the benefit of the projects, and having kind of stable arrangements that that will share those benefits in relation to the cost seems very important to put in place. But it's a bit of a developing area as well. The kind of the methodologies and the techniques are still developing in this area. So we keep working on it to try to make those early projects happen.
Yes, we are working on it on a daily basis, let's say, on a bilateral basis. We have some experience already. But in addition, a question, maybe it's a sensitive question also, taking into account the huge amount of investments for the TSOs, and I know what TSOs will say maybe, but from a regulatory point of view, do you think that the way TSOs are financed on the basis of regulatory asset base, the more they are investing, the more they have profit or benefits of it? Is this something which is also a discussion internally at Ofgem, some reflections on? I know that some regulators had some thoughts about it, but I don't know if inside Ofgem there was such a kind of discussion.
That's a big subject. I guess the way we are kind of looking at it is that or at least one aspect of it is because of the way the industry is structured here, there's quite a lot of private sector participation and the kind of arrangements that are needed to give some of that financing, especially project financing, enough stability to be able to raise it, is sort of one set of requirements. But as you say, when you take a wider perspective across Europe, TSOs are financed in many different ways. Some, as was being said a few minutes ago, are more in the public sector, and some more mixed arrangements. So we are kind of having to try to work our way towards arrangements that can kind of cope with different mixes of public sector and private sector type of participation, which is another challenge because some of the financial frameworks that they work under and things vary quite a bit too. So that's another area to be taken into account. But I think we'd share the perspective that we're keen to sort of see benefits and value being maximized, not just the number of billions of euros or pounds of assets sitting on a balance sheet. So yeah, we think it's important. I think for credibility with consumers and perhaps politicians as well, that we try to articulate the benefits and try to show how they're being measured and captured in ways that people can understand. We think that's important. I think that might need at least some change of emphasis in how regulation and regulatory finance works. Certainly investors are still very fond of their RAB structures and things like that. We hear lots about that, about how much they like it. But we certainly think that adjustments at least are kind of needed, particularly to deal with projects where some of the benefits may be more strategic, may not be immediately available, to be captured in a kind of traditional revenue stream that might be available to the private sector. So again, it looks as if there's some other mechanisms at least that would need to be added on to try to, respond to the kind of ambition that I think is coming for these cross-border assets.
Thank you. I think we will still have a reaction from TSO side maybe on this issue also.
Can I say something?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Really, TSOs are, as I said, in different ownership structure. For some things, it's good that you are 100% state-owned from the capital market perspective, from the risk perspective. It's good that you have state behind you. And also, currently, we all, nevertheless, the ownership, we all have a feeling that on the capital market, there's a lot of money just waiting to invest. But what a capital market needs, they need a stable, predictable regulatory framework. They need to trust, because now we are talking about investments that they go beyond 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And on the other side, we have regulatory framework that cover 1 to 5 years. And what will happen next? And this is what I meant with the dialogue between all of us. We have to talk how to find solution. It's not on TSOs to push regulators beyond their primary role, you said, to protect customers. We understand this thing differently. At the moment, we believe, and also a lot of different analysis shows, that if we push the investment forward, we will of course, we will enable electrification, but we will enable additional jobs. So we will push the competition on a higher level of Europe in front of other parts of the world who are in front of us, actually. And with this, I mean that the spend money today will save. We will bring the savings for the customers in the future. That's why we need to cooperate and find some way to go beyond this. And again, it sounds nicely, that's why I will say it loudly, that financeability and affordability are not competition. In competition, they should go, and I think that they can go hand in hand.
Maybe, can I say a bit on predictability and certainty in the long term? I think you're making an excellent point that we often hear similar numbers, right? That we would have an investment need in transmission grid at the EU level of about 500 billion, right? Or a bit higher. You said 800.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's a similar order of magnitude, and it's quite likely. I mean, I'm not saying that this number is not right. What I'm trying to say is that it would be interesting to see how the cost recovery for these investments and the magnitude of these investments are extremely different depending on regions. So I work in France, which is a country that has a grid that is already quite well connected, but it's a rather old grid. And so in the 100 billion euro investment plan that the national TSO put forward last year, I think, or 2 years ago, and that was approved by the NRA, most of it is actually for adaptation to climate change. And a large part of it, of course, is also for integration of renewables and electrification. But that's just an example. And I'm thinking of a paper by colleagues from another think tank called Bruegel that looked at the numbers also for investment and showed that the cost recovery sometimes indeed goes beyond the mechanisms that we currently have, but also sometimes using the mechanisms we already have, it's doable. And it's, I mean, in the French situation, it's what's planned, right? The 100 billion euro investment plan will be financed through network tariffs, and it will be about 1% extra in the network charge in the next years, which is something that you would argue is something that consumers can bear, right? But of course, I can imagine some places with much lower rates of electrification or grids that are more decentralized or less centralized or whatever. The investment would be much bigger, but also the basis of consumers. And that's also what Eamon was reminding us earlier, that sometimes you also need to extend the basis of consumers to be able to get the money back for your investment, right? When you talk about electrification, how do we manage that? And it's just something that also points to the fact that the more we push for electrification, the more we manage to electrify end users, the more money for we will have. The investment will be recovered and they will be cost efficient. So it's also something. It's just when we talk about those numbers for investment, I think we also need to keep in mind what are the key transformations that make these investments needed and also more or less bankable. And it's also what I was trying to say when I talked about how the planning, the EU level planning for grids is increasingly interlinked with policy discussions. So being able to say at the EU level, okay, so the optimized EU system, considering our climate targets and considering our grid constraints, we would need this and this and that project. That's one thing. But also saying, actually, if we don't manage to integrate this amount of renewables in that region, or we don't manage this cross-border connection, and if that project is not made, then it will endanger that target there, I think is extremely important. And I think what the grids package is putting forward is a step in the right direction. Of course, there will be a lot of there's a lot of open questions as to how that lands, right? How that is implemented and how we can get better also every year. But I think it's a step in the right direction also to open sort of the policy intricacies also of grid planning.
Thank you. Before I come to the next question, also a remark from my side. It's a huge challenge for the TSOs, everybody agrees. But we may not forget, I think, that TSOs are regulated. These are not normal private companies. They will not fall into bankruptcy, I think.
Yeah.
Thanks to the regulators, let's say. So
we have sweet concerns.
Yeah, so it's not a real competition amongst the TSOs, let's say. There are pros and cons about the fact that TSOs are regulated, but we may not forget that they are not a normal, let's say, private company on the market.
True, but we are not competing between ourselves, but we are competing, for example, on a capital market with other industries.
Yes.
And because you want actually to protect end consumers, we want to avoid the high prices of capital. So, and predictable regulatory environment give us additional backup that the prices of the money will not be that high. This is like a circle of money and circle of
I fully agree about predictability.
But
about the rate of return on equity.
Yeah.
Now, the next question maybe very shortly, because you touched already upon this issue, the fact that and also our keynote speaker talked about it in a way that the European Commission wants or sees an increasing role in the design of the future grid. For certain things, I think it's fully understandable regarding offshore. On the other hand, onshore, we can see sometimes that it's not always in line with the national development of the grid, and of course there are regional differences also. So you have a common European standard, you have national differences. Yeah, how should we manage these conflicts sometimes as national regulators to solve this problem?
Yeah, I mean, it's we're going towards the end of the afternoon, so maybe I'll start with something a bit provocative, but it's at the core of any EU collaboration initiative, right? You always have to get together the national interests and somehow duct tape them into something that is consistent at the EU level, right? And sometimes it's really easy, sometimes it looks a bit funky, right? And when you do that, you have some sort of adjustments to make with the national trajectories. This is a political exercise, and I see how the European Commission can conduct something like this because they do have a political mandate. I mean, you can discuss whether it's the right institution to do it, how they do it, what transparency, etc. But I think it makes much more sense, and it helps a lot more for the policy discussion to have the European Commission doing it rather than the NSOs, because it's sort of a different job, and it's what. Also touching upon what Andrea, you were saying in the beginning, that your task is changing, right, with climate neutrality and electrification. So that would be my first point. Then I think there is something that a lot of regulators also in the room would agree with me, but there's an issue of transparency, and we have been talking about, you know, what brand of modeling you use, basically open source or proprietary, etc. I think there's also an issue of just transparency of inputs and outputs. That means what kind of hypothesis you take, what results your model has. And I remember when I was doing when I was doing my studies, we had this course on modeling, and it was always that, you know, all models are wrong, right? What's important is what hypotheses you put in there. It's only, I mean, it's only ever a stack of hypotheses, right? What's interesting is how they relate to each other and how these hypotheses get together and get us consistent results. And I think in that regard, having a single pathway is maybe not the right way to go around it. And it's, I mean, we're in the middle of the discussion on the grids package. I mean, having the Commission draft a central scenario, a reference scenario with sensitivities is something that was proposed by the Commission. And if you look at the general approach adopted by the Council, they kept this. I mean, they added some guarantees or meant to add guarantees that the national interests are protected, and I think it's an interesting, or it's a legitimate worry, right? That you would only have if the Commission makes a scenario where you would have something that is just some, you know, modeling project that is just, you know, put on the shelf, and it's a nice optimization, right? We know the modelers, right? They make nice models, and they say this is how it should be done, and I mean, right. But I think what's interesting in scenario building is also how it gets you to talk with different stakeholders. It's saying if we don't reach this level of electrification, our grid will have trouble financing itself in the next 10 years. What does it mean? I don't want to know, you know, how many EVs I want developed. I want to know, what does it mean to develop that many EVs? How many consumers are supposed to have it? What does it mean in terms of manufacturing capacity for European EVs? And if you build a scenario, based on discussions with stakeholders, you can do that in a very intelligent way. And of course, I mean, you have a model at the end, but perhaps it's not even the most interesting result, right? And I think in that regard, the national TSO in France is an interesting example, because they have taken a really prominent role in conducting stakeholder consultations at the national level, and we have some very interesting results. And that brings me maybe to a second point, and then I'll give the floor to my colleagues as well. But it's important to have several pathways. I'm not saying, I mean, the risk with that approach is to have, you know, you have 4 really different pathways, and then anyone can just pick the one they want, and they say, look, in my pathway it says you're supposed to do this with hydrogen, and in my pathway, blah, 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 and that's kind of useless. But having a central, maybe reference pathway that is consistent with EU climate targets, because these are binding, at least some of them are binding, and then having also different pathways. And I know that in the draft TYNDP 2026, we have stress variants, which is somehow a step in that direction, but it's not yet alternative pathways, showing maybe okay, if we have less electrification or if we are too slow on renovation of buildings, this is what will happen to the grid. And in France, and again, I'm taking French example, not because I think it's universal, but it's just sometimes examples of things that can happen in different regions. But these kind of exercises have been really useful to show that we're in a situation that we have a sort of overcapacity of clean electricity supply, which is a nice problem to have when you think about it. But we're starting to have, curtailment and modulation constraints. And if that continues, we will have difficulty stabilizing the grid. And that is a really important call to action also for policymakers to push for electrification. If we manage to have these kind of discussions between member states and the European Commission around that central scenario that is being, and I see the doubt in Koen's eyes. So I'm really curious also to hear, what you think is useful for this initiative. But I think it's a very interesting step forward.
Thank you for this insight, but a short comment maybe. It's a French situation, and we are living in other countries the same. I think one of the problems is there are a lot of renewables. There's also a big amount of nuclear energy, which is less modular. And so if you have a lot of renewables in the system, you provoke problems. I think it's linked a little bit to the way that the base load is generated also, maybe. But
not really.
But that's what we hear in other countries,
Let's keep
in
the
Belgium,
track for
for
the
example. But anyway, I will short my question for Andrea. We hear a lot of problems. We have to solve them, of course, and a challenge for the TSOs. TSOs have to invest offshore. We heard already NSEC initiatives, interconnections, as well in North Seas as other parts of Europe. TSOs have to make choices because there are also investment needed onshore, because if you make investments offshore and you cannot bring the electricity on land or inland, you have a problem. How do TSOs see to make those choices, or are there no choices to make?
From the perspective of cost sharing?
Cost sharing and also the practical choices to make, because you cannot do everything at the same time.
Yes, but very simple, if we are building offshore projects, we need to do something on land as well. So this is, if the direction with offshore is the right one, then we are facing the consequences that these two things should go hand in hand. But ENTSO actually prepared a position paper last year on the offshore projects. And they were tackling this issue with, I think, great sensitivity and political correctness, I would say, because the document, I was not in this function at that time and just read the document. And the final decision, I would say, was that the solution for cost sharing between involving countries is early regional planning. So this is something that is crucially important. And of course, I think that Ines already mentioned today, political alignment. All these things are part of policy decisions as well, and transparent communication as well. Cost sharing is something that also from the practice we know, for cross-border project, you need to work together from the very early stages, from the planning onward. So also we as ELS have some experience on that matter, because for the CEF funding, it's crucial that you have project with cross-border implication, and this is something that we learned. Also other countries, I think they have some experience, and offshore is just a good case study and so huge that actually involve all the challenges that you can imagine on the grid.
I hear
project.
collaboration and regional planning.
Yeah.
I think that
And political alignment as well.
yes, I fully agree. But maybe one stupid question, or can we from the NRA world ask some support from the TSOs to admit the NRAs inside NSEC? Then we can really work together.
Yes, you can always support
We can count on the support of the
Yeah.
TSOs, I understand.
And if we find the money, if we use the money of European Commission, different funds, you know, this is another topic that we can tackle just quickly, not penalize us.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
So we will work together.
Yeah, we
in
will not go there.
Maybe for Mark from Ofgem, I will take two questions together. Did Ofgem foresaw has a specific regulatory framework for or to facilitate offshore investments, or is it a general framework? Do you have specific rules? And linked to that, do you have enough competences, or do you think regulators should have additional competences to monitor the investments and the costs during the operational phase, during the period that TSO is putting in place or doing the investments, budget monitoring, cost-benefit analysis, and so on and so on. So this is a question. It's a little bit twofold: regulatory framework, and do you think the NRA has, specifically for Ofgem, enough powers and competences to avoid cost escalation whilst the TSOs are executing their investment plans?
Yeah, thanks, Cohen. Yeah, it's a question in kind of two sections. Yes, we do elaborate specific regulatory frameworks for offshore projects. That is kind of the way it has emerged here in Great Britain. That in kind of two main parts. Firstly, how the offshore transmission for offshore wind farms works here has got a distinct regime that was sort of intended to maximize competition, particularly on the cost of capital. So what we call the offshore transmission owner or OFTO regime, and then also in the interconnector area that it has its own regulatory framework, at least for the point-to-point interconnectors. But again, the hybrid projects, we see probably slightly different things being needed. So for the first two pilot projects in our offshore hybrid asset pilot scheme, again, we modified the interconnector regime somewhat there to enable those first two projects. And compared with the scale of the ambition that we are, when you look ahead and you kind of hear the bigger plans, you can see that probably quite a lot more will need to be done, really to kind of reflect the bigger ambitions as we move forward. But we're, at least in my work, we're still working on getting maybe the first baby steps turned into concrete projects that can be executed. But you can certainly see, looking ahead, that there will need to be plenty more regulatory development, and it would be certainly my personal perspective on that. And then the second part of your question around whether the NRAs may need additional competence is around cost escalation. I think you mentioned the operational phase, but I think we're probably quite interested in the development phase and the construction phase as well. It seems that the sort of supply chain picture has become quite a lot more complicated over the past 3 to 5, certainly 3 years, maybe a bit longer. And it does feel like NRAs may need more resource or more or access, whether that comes from consultancy support or expanding teams that can look in some of these areas, and particularly if we're going to be looking at projects that are quite new and quite different, where we're looking to do things for the first time, and it may be harder to to find the information, to be able to monitor these things so well. So it does look like there's some new challenges coming through that we definitely need to bear in mind, and also to try to make sure that we're kind of aware of how to try to get the efficiency from the projects where that is possible. Sometimes, for the project, there's first of a kind costs or first of a kind risks, and we just have to sort of pay them, but still to try to quantify them in a sensible way and see that the learning is happening seems very important. So it does feel like there's probably a need for more specialist expertise and probably more resource in this area of monitoring. And I think also perhaps for some of the kind of cross-border projects that we're talking about, particularly more complicated ones, it may need to be more of a kind of a joint cross-border type of monitoring as well. I mean, obviously regulators, we all have kind of our kind of national mandate or arrangements that we have, but it does look as if with some of these projects we will need to be maybe looking at things maybe on a more joined up kind of basis, and from at an earlier point to be able to monitor them successfully and understand how they will proceed through the different stages of development, construction, and then into the operational phase.
Thank you, Mark. I see that we used our time in a very useful way. I want to thank the panelists for their interventions and to sharing their experiences. What I retain is that it's a huge challenge for everybody, for the NRAs, for the TSOs, but also to realize the expectations of the European Commission regarding climate neutrality. I think that security of supply was added in the recent past. Cooperation amongst all concerned parties is from utmost importance, and especially I think coming from a regulatory side between NRAs, it's very important, as Mark mentioned. We can exchange experiences, learn from each other, and this is in the benefit of everybody, from the TSOs and the NRAs and the whole society. So once again, I want to thank everybody. It was very interesting, and I hope that we can see each other next time, because I think there are still a lot of issues to be tackled in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, Ines.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you to our panelists for this very interesting discussion. Lots of food for thought and I would say quite concrete discussions. So now we'll move into our poolside chat. To be very honest, we first had thought of this as a fireside chat, but after the heat wave in Europe, we really didn't want to talk about fire and heat, and we were more thinking about pool and summer vibes. So for this, I will welcome Bram Kleijs, our Secretary General, and welcome back Annegret Grubel, the CEER President, to have this chat about energy affordability and what regulators can do about it. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Rafael, and good afternoon, everybody. Indeed, it's great. I like the idea of a poolside chat at the end of this afternoon. It's still hot, less hot than it was, but we can use some refreshment, and I think we can also take a little step back from the very interesting, but sometimes a bit technical discussions that we've had. We've heard about the big trends in the energy markets. We've heard about big investments needed in the grids. So Annegret, we would like to talk a little bit about okay, what does this actually mean for people's energy bills? And importantly, what can regulators do to keep those bills in check, to make sure that there's also trust in from consumers in how they are charged those costs, because that's really important. I think for the continued investments that are needed for the energy transition, and for continued moving towards decarbonization, of course. So maybe start with being a little bit didactic. So the energy bills that we all pay, could you very briefly explain a little bit what the main components of those energy bills are, and importantly, how we expect them to evolve in the near future?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And I think a lot of the topics have been touched upon today. And now let's try to, let's say, to look at it from a more principle-based approach. I'm very grateful for this possibility. And indeed, the biggest drivers of any energy bill are, of course, the energy itself. Yeah. And we had recently, through the crisis and now again the Middle East crisis, seen how quickly this impacts, in particular, the countries where the dependency on fossil fuels were higher than in others. They were hit particularly, and including of course their consumers and their industry. And it is important to know, and we come to the aspect of affordability in a moment, that for energy the low-income consumers are hit most by those increases. Yeah, so I think the development with regard to the energy component of the energy bill depends a lot on the speed of the transition, and of course the dependency and the reduction of the dependency with regard to fossil fuels. So therefore, I would not dare to make a quick trend. Yeah, I think we have seen how fast it goes in the other direction. But I think even in case we have a more or overwhelmingly renewable energy mix, I think the current costs, in a sense, are going down, and with this also the bills. The question is, of course, okay, how long will this take? And we all, I think, have to admit that it takes longer than maybe originally we said. Yeah, or we thought. I come back to this in a moment. It's an important aspect that we have to face as well. The second, of course, and that is the part that is in the core responsibility of the regulators, are the grid charges. Yeah, or the grid costs, and translated into grid charges, and those then translated into a system of tariff schemes. Yeah, so that just to make this to make the link, yeah, that these are linked together. And I think also, again, with regard to the energy transition and the energy system transition, we have one element that is increasing the costs, and that is that the grid has to be expanded, has to be restructured to be able to cope with renewables. Then also it has, of course, to be operated efficiently nonetheless. So we have investments and we have the ongoing operation. And on the, let's say, short middle term, the increased need for investments to expand, to restructure the grid, certainly increases the costs. Here we have the first element that the regulator can try to control by having incentives for a efficient investment. So not over-dimensioning, etc. Careful planning. We have heard the importance of planning, and that may be something that was underestimated. We see it now, the increasing relevance of the planning. That is something, in particular on the European level. Yeah, so this is something where we can make a difference in terms of the costs as such. Yeah, we are not talking now about the charges, the tariffs that comes in a moment, but about the costs as such. And even so, they increase. If the regulator does his job properly, he can make this increase as little as possible. Yeah, and I'm saying this not in the sense Ofgem pointed this out, the colleague from Ofgem right away. Maybe in the past there was too much focus or emphasis on everything should be cheap and not we're probably too short term. Now I think we have to engage in making sure it is a long-term efficiency and cost effectiveness, and that includes the grid investment as such, but also making sure the choice is better balanced in the sense of not only hardwire investment, but also increasing flexibility, yeah, to again reduce the overall investment costs, which then also facilitates reducing ultimately the bills. Yeah, I think there is a bit of a trade-off for now, but in the mid to long term, I think this is an important aspect.
Maybe it's good to just clarify what you mean by flexibility, because that can be a lot of things.
That can be a lot of things, indeed. So that means that we look at options that can make the usage of the grid more adapted to the intermittency of renewables. That means storage. That means flexibility from industrial users, flexibility also from households. Even so, this is often overestimated. Yeah, I think we have to be honest in that place. But any case, I know that I cannot say, okay, everything that you can replace with flexibility, you have less investment. I know that this is not a one-to-one equation, but I think on the other side, we can also not go on like saying, okay, I need to make sure everything runs properly. I plan 4 transmission lines instead of 3. Yeah, so there we should have a clear look at the planning. What can we save in terms of even efficient energy investment, grid investment, by having by using more the other options for efficiency and for grid usage. Yeah, so this goes then into also the usage part. Yeah, and we have also heard quite clearly that the operational part should be optimized. That is also one of our pillars of our strategy. So we want to make sure that the grid operates efficiently, again with incentives, etc. Yeah, so that's something where we can, I think, exploit further potentials, and that brings then ideally, and it's a question of course of time horizon, the costs down. Yeah, and that I'm saying this because the real let's say the real bringing down the energy bill is not about in the short term lowering taxes. That's an important element as well. But if we want to have a successful energy transition, we need the investment, and in this case we need to make sure investment is efficient and all efficiency potentials are exploited to the maximum, so that we after a while, yeah, ultimately, if we can manage to integrate the system properly, to have the whole system approach oriented towards energy, towards the renewables, that then we can run the energy system again at lower costs. I know this is a long-term perspective, so to speak, but I always hate as an economist the mixture of how can we bring down the bills and then say, okay, we lower the taxes, we lower, I don't know what, yeah, we exempt the industry, etc. I think we have to make sure that the energy bills in the mid to long term can only be reduced if we optimize the energy system as a whole by looking at all the different aspects that I mentioned. Maybe I stop here.
No, that's really great. And indeed, yeah, you talked about the importance of planning at European level. I imagine also at the national level.
At
because
the
of course, national regulators have an important role to also look at national development plans, which are of course also in many of our European countries. Really important places where investments need to happen. So that's of course influencing the total investment cost, the importance of flexibility, and maybe being able to delay or defer some investments and bring overall costs down. That's great. But increasing that efficiency will also depend, I think, on how costs are allocated. And so can we talk a little bit about what tools regulators have to allocate costs fairly on the one hand, so fairness is really important, but also in a way that supports system supporting behavior from consumers to make sure that this is all running smoothly and as economists like to see it.
Yes, important aspect indeed. To have thank you, to have we have the principle of cost reflectivity, and that also is then linked, of course, to cost allocation mechanisms, I would say, and there we have the element of fairness. And what we discussed lately, for example, in Germany, but it will also come with a proposal, with a legislative proposal of the European Commission on the network charges, is how to what incentives can we give to provide a so-called grid-friendly behavior, and that in case there are exemptions or discounts, you are not getting those for using a certain minimum amount of energy. Yeah? So we have to revert the system, but because you can adjust your behavior of using grid or using using energy and using in particular the grid, and that then reduces the costs again, and then you can get in return as a compensation the discount. Yeah, so there's no discount with any sort of grid-friendly behavior. Yeah, including, and that relates very often then, there are the question about, because we have congestion, about providing locational signals, yeah, so that we also have then I think the flexibility, well, not markets, but the flexibility in general on the, let's say, on the local level, yeah, so that's something where maybe there is a potential that is not yet indeed tapped into. Yeah, so because we are tending to think about, in particular, of investment on the transmission level, and that is important, no doubt about it. In particular, also we have heard it about the offshore wind, but also with regard to linking this and to cross-border interconnection capacity. Here, this is something important, but as important is also the distribution level. The distribution grids must be able to accommodate the increasing number of distributed energy sources, renewable sources. Yeah, and that's something where we need to have then what we call the locational signals. Yeah, without, however, and I think that is important to say, without, however, to let's say, losing out of sight the overall optimization. I think it is sometimes a mistake to think we optimize locally with locational signals, and then we forget that the system as a whole must also be optimized. Yeah, so that is a kind of constraint. Yeah, so we must always think about both aspects. Yeah, so the system as a whole must be in balance, if I may say so, must be optimized, and the locational signals must try to contribute to this and not to contradict it. That's a bit of a difficulty or a risk sometimes.
Yeah, that is definitely a discussion that often is happening in discussions like these, also in the context of the grids package, and will no doubt also come up with the pending proposals on tariff design. This balance, if you want, the balance between our first panel and the second panel, where we looked at market trends and making the markets work better, and on the other hand, of course, investments in infrastructure. How do we balance signals in whatever form given by the markets that are supposed to then reflect system needs with price signals or other signals given by network tariffs? Is there a conflict or is there an opportunity? How do regulators
yeah, that's a
deal
very
with that?
good question. I would say we need to make it an opportunity. Yeah, so if the market signal or the price signal from the market, let's say, so from the trading activity, is contradicting what we have in network charges, certainly something is wrong. And I would say it's rather the regulator that may have missed the point than the market. Yeah, so
the market is always right.
The market is already. I'm an economist, pure and simple. But no, well, let's say these two should not fall together, but at least they should be in the same direction. And of course, as we know, we had the big discussion about the market design and about how to complement a market that was designed more to the fossil fuel system, how to make sure the market design works also in a system where the costs are differently, and therefore need also to be recouped differently, and that is something that we have to bear in mind when setting network charges. Yeah, so that's because in the end, I think that is important. If we say the market signals reflect the system costs, the system needs, yeah, this is exactly what we also want to catch with our network charges, that they are reflecting efficient costs. Yeah, efficient costs. And of course, there may be a difference in terms of our assumptions, our modeling, what we take into account, and above all, sometimes about the time horizon. Yeah, because that has some implications for the depreciation period, for the depreciation methodology, and all that. And there we need to make sure that let's say what investors expect in terms of recoupment period is similar to what we consider to be, for example, an economic lifetime, and not let's say fiddling around there. Yeah, so that is how I approach the two things, and I think the risk is always when you start providing individual exemptions which are not reflecting the system costs or the system needs as a whole.
Yes, that's, I think, a very interesting and important message. And I'm sure that in the months to come, we will dive a lot deeper into that topic. It's also a good link to some of the remarks made by Eamon in his keynote. So thank you very much for this. This is a great and insightful discussion at the end of our afternoon. I think we can wrap up our poolside chat at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Yeah, I don't know if you have any concluding thoughts on the afternoon.
I think it was a great afternoon. We have touched upon really all the hot topics that are that we are looking at right now. How to make sure the market works and functions properly, and above all, the big discussion now about grid investment for the energy transition. I think we should not, let's say, lower our ambition in that regard, but we should be fair with regard to the timing it takes and to the costs it involves. And I think that is the message that I would like to make, that we need to, and for this reason we need as regulators to make sure this period until we reach the ultimate, let's say, a new decarbonized energy system is the costs are spread in a fair way, and also and this regards of course also in the fair contribution of all consumers or consumer groups, user groups, in contributing to the recovery of the efficient costs. And if there is an issue about affordability, and as I mentioned at the beginning, we have to take this into account, then again, not by let's say, trying to cope with, I say manipulate the tariffs or the energy costs or something like this, but by really saying, okay, this is something where the low income or vulnerable energy users do have a problem to afford even the basic needs, even if they come at an efficient cost. In this case, there should be a support, targeted support from, for example, the state budget. Yeah, I think there was sometimes a mistake, or by lowering the taxes. That's where the role is. Yeah, there is sometimes a mixture of that the regulator can make sure by the network charges that we also reach affordability. And I think there is this is a bit of a discrepancy which we need to face, and where we need to say, deal with these issues in a targeted manner via the state aid or state budget. Well, for consumers, it isn't even state aid, but do not ask the regulator to fix this problem, which is an income problem, which is outside the tools we have. Yeah, I'm not saying that we should not aim for this, but I'm saying that and this is an issue, of course, for regulators, but I'm saying there is a limit to what we can do with our tools. Maybe put it like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you,
okay.
And thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Then I think we can finalize the afternoon on this note. I think a very important and a timely message from our president, and I think we can close the conference with this, and wish you all a good rest of the evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.